we start the point of the French Revolution. I think it is one of the most important points in this unit. After the American Independence War in Europe, everything went on exactly the same way. So there are several countries, a lot of different states, and most of them are ruled by absolute monarchs. Enlightened despots, kings using the ideas of the Enlightenment, but actually they were absolute monarchs, absolute kings. There are exceptions, you know. In Britain there is a constitutional monarchy, but the king has a lot of power too. So this is what we know. The king is the source of all powers. This is the most important example. Louis XIV, this is from the 17th century, but during the 18th century kings behaved exactly the same way. But in France a huge revolution happened. Why in France? And why this revolution happened? We are going to consider different factors, different ideas, causes, why this revolution happened in France. What happened? So different factors were combined and then something happened. For example, this is a symbol. This is the killing of Julius Caesar. The one is the liberal ideas. These liberal ideas, the economic and political liberal ideas, were very important in France, spread in France. And then people, intellectuals, and especially high bourgeoisie, they started questioning the king, and they saw the king was an absolute monarch with a lot of power, and he worried not a lot for his people. So they started asking why the system was like that. And then society was divided into privileged and non-privileged people. Privileged people, clergy and nobility, had more rights than unprivileged people. So this is what people are questioning. Another important factor is the example. They see, okay, in France we have an absolute monarchy, and in the rest of Europe there is exactly the same. So this is the way. But now in the United States they know there is a new country, a country they helped create, because France supported the British settlers, the British colonies against Britain. So they know they have created a new country in America, and there is no king, there are no different states, no nobility, so all of them are equal. The Constitution of the United States says all citizens are equal, so they have an example. The United States set an example for the rest of Europe, for the rest of the world. So in France, they are questioning why not. They did that, and they are working like that, and everything is okay. And why not here? Why should we have a king? A third factor that it's important is money. So the third estate, unprivileged people, peasants, bourgeoisie, workers, artisans, they have to pay taxes to the state, to the king. But they see actually the king is not, the nobility is not paying taxes to the king, and the clergy is not paying taxes to the king. And the richest social groups are clergy and nobility. So the rich people are not paying taxes, and poor people are the people who actually are paying taxes. So this is another factor that is making people feeling, of course, angry. Imagine you have to pay a lot, but you are poor, and you see rich people close to you with more rights, and they don't have to pay the same you must pay. Last factor is a crisis. And crisis in this period means people is starving. People are starving. People haven't got food to eat. So that means a crisis. Crisis is something in this period is something horrible. So nowadays we know we are in crisis. So perhaps we lose our jobs, but the state gives us a stipendium, something to survive, or if not, we can get something from the state. If the state helps you, if you have health problems, you can go to the hospital. It doesn't matter if you have money or not, you can go to the hospital, you can go to school. In this period, no. If you don't have money, you cannot eat, you cannot take care of yourself. If you get ill, bad luck, you die. So they see France has a huge crisis because the agricultural production is not very good these years, and at the same time they paid a lot. They spend a lot of money helping the British colonies fighting against Britain. And before that, during the 7 Years' War, France fought against Britain and lost the war. So France lost territories, lost colonies, and of course lost resources. At the same time, the nobility, especially the king and royal family, they are wasting a lot of money. They have luxurious palaces, luxurious parties, and they don't care about people. And people are dying. They are dying of starvation. They have nothing to eat. So these factors together, the example of the United States, this economic crisis, this suffering of people, and these ideas about why not change things led to discontent, to a social unrest. People started openly criticizing the king. And the king's ministers, the economy ministers, they are trying to solve the economic problems of the kingdom, but they cannot. So they suggest the king to make the nobility and the clergy to pay taxes. Then the state receives more money and they can spend more money. But there is an assembly, an assembly formed up by the nobility and the clergy, and they together agree they don't want to pay taxes. They are not going to pay taxes because that's their privilege. So the king calls for a meeting of the three states: nobility, clergy, and the third estate. That means they need a meeting from everyone to get one solution, to come to a solution. So they demand people to present, these estates, to present books of grievances. There were books of grievances. What is not working? What do they need? So these three social groups, these three estates, presented their books of grievances, and the Estates General, this meeting with the king there and the three different estates, met to solve this situation because they are in a real situation. So the king suggested everyone should pay taxes to help the state, and they voted. They have the right to vote. The problem is each state has a vote. So nobility voted no pay taxes, clergy voted to not pay taxes, and the third estate voted yes, we must pay taxes, everyone. 2 against 1. So this taxation was completely useless. So the third estate realized they cannot win. It's impossible because nobility and clergy always they are allies. So they left the Estates General and they created a National Assembly. And in this meeting, this National Assembly, they realized and they considered themselves the only real power in France. The real France is this. So that moment, 14th July, happened the storming of the Bastille. The Bastille was a prison where in this prison there were a few political enemies of the king's political enemies. So people stormed the Bastille, and at the same time in the rural areas peasants attacked the palaces, and the French Revolution had started. This National Assembly considered itself the real government of France, and the king saw that he couldn't fight against that because the army was formed up by people from the third estate. High officials were from the nobility, but soldiers, normal soldiers, regular soldiers were people from the third estate. So he couldn't resist, and he accepted the creation of this National Assembly. And this National Assembly started making legislation, making laws. First measure they took were to eliminate the old regime. So they say the feudalism, feudal rights, they no longer exist. Of course, nor the privileges from the nobility and the church, and the taxes paid to the church are eliminated too. This is the tithe, the 10% of all your production. At the same time, they issued a Declaration of the Men and Citizen Rights. This is imitating the United States. That means all men are equal and they have exactly the same rights. And their principles, the liberté, freedom, and equality, all of them are exactly equal. And to guarantee this, they created a constitution. A constitution the king must obey. That means, since this constitution exists, the absolutism is eliminated. So the monarchy changed, it was transformed into a constitutional monarchy. The king is not longer the only king, it's king, but he must obey the constitution. He cannot produce laws against the constitution. So the assembly created this constitution, and this constitution established, following the United States Constitution, this constitution established the separation of the three powers: legislative, executive, and judicial. You see, legislative is given to the assembly, the executive is given to the king. The king is the head of the government, he's going to be the government, and the judge, the judicial power is given to independent judges. Who is going to form this assembly? According to this constitution, there is a suffrage. That means people, men, male suffrage, men over 25 years old, under 25 they are considered underage, so over 25 years old, and with a certain wealth. Why? Because they think if they have wealth, they are rich, they are cultivated people, because they had teachers, private teachers, so they learned how to read, to write, etc. So these people are able to choose good people too. That's logical. So this is a census suffrage. You can people who vote are people only in this census, and to be in this census you must be 25 years old or older, and you must have a certain amount of wealth, properties, usually properties. Constitution is issued. This is the first constitution of the French, and then it started the one phase of the French Revolution. First phase was this national constituent assembly, how they made the revolution, the beginning of the revolution, and created an assembly. And next phase will be the legislative assembly. So this assembly now is producing, writing laws. How are we going to create the new legislation for this new country that we have created? And it's a new country, because now the nobility disappeared. The king is just a ruler, but all men are equal. That's very strange. Rest of countries in Europe, they are all regime countries. There are different states, nobility, clergy, and third estate. So this legislative assembly is changing the country. The problem is they are part of the assembly, they want to make reforms, but slow reforms, and there is a part of the assembly who want to make a radical reform, actually to eliminate the old regime and probably eliminate the king too and create a new society. This will be the Girondins versus Jacobins. We will say Girondins, they are the moderate revolutionaries. They want a revolution, but a moderate revolution. And Jacobins, they are going to be more radical. They are radical revolutionaries. They want to eliminate the enemies of the revolution, and they want to create a new country. Problem: the other countries around France, surrounding France, they saw what happened there and say, oops, perhaps it's going to happen exactly the same in my country. So they threatened France of declaring war, and especially Austria and Prussia, they are German states and absolutist states, they declared war on France, and war started. So this is the map of Europe, and the war, imagine the war against these countries is being difficult. So France started losing battles. So who do you think is fault? Now we have a constitutional monarchy, and this is going to change. Why? Because of that. These powers, these great European powers, are fighting against France, and the French citizens, they lose battles, and they consider is the king's fault. They think the king is guilty because he wants to be defeated. He wants France to be defeated, because if France is defeated, he is restored as an absolute monarch. So people assaulted the king's palace, and then they sent Louis XVI to a trial. So there is a national convention, and there is a trial on Louis the 16th to decide if he is innocent or guilty, and he's considered guilty and is punished with a death penalty. So Louis the 16th is sent to the guillotine and he's executed.
Citoyen, dites-moi ce que je dois faire, monsieur. Il faut enlever votre redingote et votre cravate. Ce n'est pas nécessaire, monsieur.
Je meurs, innocent de tous les crimes dont on m'accuse. Je pardonne à ceux qui sont coupables de ma mort. Et je prie Dieu pour que le sang que vous allez répandre ne retombe jamais sur la France.
And after that, his wife too. So, what happened when the European powers, first European powers, you see, Britain, Russia, Austria, and 7 second-level European powers, there are Spain and Portugal, and these countries together, they make a coalition. This is the so-called the first coalition. And they all together they make an alliance to fight against France, and all of them started fighting France, attacking for different parts, and at the same time inside France there is a revolution, an uprising. So Catholic people who rose up against these new rulers. The king is being executed, so the country, the constitutional monarchy, this monarchy disappeared. Now France is a republic. So all the rest of countries, the kingdoms, they are fighting. For example, Spain invaded France because the king of France was the Spanish king's cousin. They are family. Great Britain is, invades Austria, Prussia. Everybody is invading France, and at the same time in France there is uprisings. So the French revolutionaries radicalized. They must fight harder than ever to protect this revolution. This Committee of Public Safety, controlled by 2 important leaders, Danton and Robespierre, and they started fighting not only the abroad enemies, the other countries, but the enemies inside France. They must eliminate all opposition in France. Actually, Robespierre created a dictatorship, and he killed thousands of people. To protect the revolution, they encouraged people to denounce other people, enemies. So sometimes people said, my neighbor is an enemy of the revolution. He wants the king to come back. and then this person was automatically executed. They fought against all the enemies of the revolution. So these are Danton and Robespierre, the leaders of this revolution. This period of time was known as the age of terror, the Great Fear. So nobody was safe, so everybody was executing everybody, and actually at the end it doesn't matter, men, old men, young men, it doesn't matter. All of them were executed, and the guillotine, you see, it was used in France till the 20th century. This is the last execution, public execution in France. You see this one, they are real pictures, real photos. It happened really. And then Girondins were horrified because the Jacobins were in power and they tried to eliminate Girondins. So Girondins actually, they made a coup d'etat, they revolted, and then they seized Robespierre and sent Robespierre to the guillotine. So guillotine was executed, and this period of time finished. And Girondins decided to create a new constitution and to make a directory. That means 5 members, 5 people are going to rule, because if there is only one, like Robespierre, he gets too much power, and that can be unfair. So they created this directory, 5 people, and for this republic, so this directory sent Robespierre, you see, to the guillotine, and then moderate revolutionaries achieved power. What's the problem with moderate? Moderates faced opposition. Sorry about that. Opposition. This opposition to the moderate politicians were carried on by radicals. The radicals want something more, and not only radicals but royalists, people who wanted the king to have a king. They wanted to have a king in France. They want France as a kingdom. They don't want a republic. And the European powers, the other countries, who want to eliminate this new republic. They want to set the example of the absolute monarchy. All the countries are against France, but someone appeared, and this someone is Napoleon. You know this one, Napoleon Bonaparte. It was a very famous general, very young general, who started winning battle after battle, and that was really unexpected, because all the countries together, these coalitions of countries fighting against France, and France alone started not only winning battles but invading other countries. And thanks to Napoleon. Napoleon was a military genius. He started expanding France, and then he became popular and more popular. He became so popular that he made a coup d'etat. He resisted this second coalition until he made a coup d'etat and he achieved power. With 2 friends, with the Abbasies and Ducos, they created a consulate. They said, we need more resources for our glorious army, and we are going to rule France. Of course, Napoleon was winning all the wars, all the battles. He was winning the war, so he was very popular in France, and everybody supported Napoleon. Until Napoleon and these 2 people, they created this consulate. But actually, the important one, the one who had the power, was Napoleon.